The moment I walked into Westlake Memorial that night, I felt the kind of heaviness that tells you something is already going wrong even before it happens. The halls smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, and the fluorescent lights flickered just enough to irritate everyone, but not enough for anyone to fix them. I had barely hung my coat when I heard shouting coming from the supply corridor. I turned the corner and saw Mr. Latham, the night supervisor, looming over Mr. Rivera, one of our oldest janitors. A trash bag had ripped while he was lifting it, spilling used gauze and plastic cups across the tiles. It was an accident, clearly. The floor was slick from a recent mop, and the bag had been overloaded from the afternoon crew. But none of that mattered to Latham. He pointed a finger inches from Rivera's face, his voice rising so loudly it echoed down the whole corridor. "You people never learn. You come in here, you mess everything up, you do the bare minimum and expect praise." Rivera apologized quietly, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the mess. I stepped forward without thinking. "It is just a spilled bag. I will help him clean it up." Latham snapped his head toward me. "Ward, step back." When I did not move, his eyes narrowed. "Say one more word, and I will write you up for insubordination." My heartbeat thudded in my ears, but I knelt beside Rivera anyway and helped him pick up the trash. His eyes glistened with humiliation. "Thank you," he whispered. Latham stormed off, but not before tossing an assignment slip onto my lap and saying, "You want to play hero? Fine. Room 17A, full bath. VIP protocols. Now." VIP meant one thing. The Coma ward for high-profile patients, the place no one wanted to be assigned because the silence was worse than the work. I walked to 17A, still angry, still shaking a little. When I opened the door, warm, filtered light spilled out and the scent of lavender disinfectant drifted toward me. The room was beautiful, almost like a hotel suite. But in the center of it all lay a man who looked like he had been carved out of stillness. Julian Hale. I recognized him from the news, even though the tubes and machines changed him. He had been the youngest biomedical millionaire in the state, a rising star, until his car went off a highway bridge 11 months ago. His chart said minimal response. Prognosis uncertain. No visitors this week. I walked closer, my shoes silent on the polished floor. A faint hum from the heart monitor filled the room. 72 beats per minute, steady, detached. I reached for the warm basin and cloths prepared earlier. The previous nurse had left a note taped to the counter. "Do not waste time. He is not waking up." I stared at the words longer than I needed to. Something about them stung, maybe because I already felt invisible enough myself. I pulled the privacy curtain halfway and moved his arm gently to place the towel under it. His skin was warm, surprisingly warm for someone who had not moved in almost a year. His jaw was strong, his lashes dark. He looked like a man paused in the middle of life rather than one fading out of it. As I wiped his forearm with slow, careful strokes, I spoke without meaning to. "I know you cannot hear me. Or maybe you can." I paused. Today was rough. People can be cruel for no reason. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. I dipped the cloth again, wrung out the water, and placed it against his chest. The moment my hand touched him, the monitor ticked up by 2 beats. 74. I froze. The rise was small but clear. I glanced at the door, half expecting someone to barge in and tell me I imagined it. I touched his shoulder gently. The monitor jumped 1 more beat. I whispered, "Can you feel this?" The monitor steadied again at 75. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would drown out the machines. I leaned closer, not even sure what I was hoping for. A breath, a blink, anything. Nothing happened for a full minute. I felt foolish, exhausted, lonely in a room meant for someone important but abandoned by everyone who should have cared. I finished bathing him carefully, folding the cloths and adjusting his pillows. When I reached for his hand to place it back under the blanket, his fingers twitched. Not a reflex twitch. A slow, intentional curl, like someone trying to hold on to something in a dream. I caught my breath and whispered, "Julian, if you can hear me, I am here." The monitor rose again by 1 beat, just 1, but enough to make every hair on my arms lift. I stepped back, staring at him as if he might open his eyes at any second. He did not. But the air in the room shifted almost like the silence had been waiting for me to notice him. I left 17A with my heart racing and my mind spinning. I knew two things with absolute certainty. One, something had just happened in that room that no chart could explain. And two, nothing in my life was going to be the same after tonight. When I pushed open the door to Westlake Memorial the next night, the thought of returning to room 17 filled me with a strange mix of dread and anticipation, like stepping into a memory that had not fully formed yet. The hospital felt unusually hollow, a cavern of white walls and muffled footsteps, the kind of place where silence settles into your skin until you forget what real sound feels like. My shift started with the usual chaos at the nurse station, overdue charts, malfunctioning scanners, missing thermometers, and a supervisor who barked orders without ever lifting a finger. But through all of it, something tugged at me quietly from the corner of my mind, the image of Julian's fingers trying to close around mine. I kept replaying it, the slight motion, the tiny curl of life, and the way the monitor responded to my voice as if it knew me. Yet every time the memory surged, doubt would creep in behind it like a shadow. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was wishful thinking, the kind that grows inside you when your own life feels like it is hanging by a thread. By the time I finished rounds and walked toward the VIP wing, I felt the shift inside me. I was nervous, hopeful, and afraid of being wrong all at once. 17A was lit softly, the privacy curtain half drawn the same way I had left it. Machines whispered their steady electronic sounds. I stepped in and stood at the foot of the bed, the warm glow from the chandelier above him reflecting off the steel railings. Julian looked exactly the same as he had the night before, still composed, almost peaceful. It is strange how quickly you grow familiar with someone who cannot speak, cannot move, cannot even open their eyes to acknowledge you. Somehow he had already become a presence in my mind, a quiet weight I could not ignore. I closed the door gently and pulled out fresh towels. As I walked toward the bed, I said softly, "I am back." The monitor held steady this time, no jump like the night before, nothing to confirm what I thought I had seen. A flicker of embarrassment warmed my cheeks. I was a trained nurse, not someone who should be interpreting every little beep as a message from beyond. Maybe Latham was right. Maybe I was letting the pressure get to me. I began my routine, checking lines, adjusting tubes, smoothing the blanket. I moved slowly, deliberately, because the last thing I wanted was to hurt him or disturb the fragile rhythm of his medical support. The room smelled faintly of eucalyptus, a scent the hospital added to VIP rooms to make them feel less clinical. It made me uncomfortable sometimes, like we were pretending these rooms were sanctuaries, instead of waiting rooms for tragedies that no one wanted to face directly. I lifted his arm to reposition it, taking extra care to place a soft towel under his elbow. His skin felt warm under my palms. I tried not to expect anything this time, no twitch, no pulse jump, no sign that he could hear me. I did not want to create miracles in my head. Miracles were for movies, for late-night infomercials about divine intervention, not for a man who had been unconscious for almost a year. But as I shifted his arm, I found myself whispering, "Can you hear me tonight?" The monitor stayed steady. 72. No reaction. I felt a hollow drop in my chest, a strange disappointment that I had no right to feel. I had only known him 2 nights. He was not mine to hope for. That thought made something sting sharply inside me. I leaned closer, studying the faint lines on his face, the slight tension at his brow, the softness of his eyelashes against his pale skin. He looked like someone who had lived 1,000 moments but was suspended just inches away from all of them. I moved to the basin and dipped a cloth into warm water, pressing out the excess. The warmth felt soothing against my fingers. When I brought the cloth to his shoulder, I spoke again, but this time my voice came out softer than intended. People were not very kind today. It is silly, I know, but sometimes it is hard to keep going when you feel like no one sees you. I paused, feeling ridiculous for confiding in a man who could not answer. But there was something grounding about speaking into the stillness of the room, something that made my own thoughts feel less heavy. I continued wiping his shoulder gently. I almost got written up again. "My roommate is moving out, so I need to find a cheaper place. Rent is impossible these days, and I do not know. I guess everything feels loud even when it is quiet. The monitor made a soft beep. Just one, not a jump, not a spike, just a reminder that he was there, breathing, existing in a space where every sound was a question without an answer. I blinked, my breath stilled. That single beep felt louder than any words could have been. I whispered, "I should not expect you to respond." "I know that." I dipped the cloth and kept cleaning. The silence settled again, heavier than before. When I finished, I placed the towel at the edge of the basin and stood beside him, staring at the rise and fall of his chest. I wondered what his voice sounded like, what he had been like before the accident, whether he had been cold and untouchable, like the articles suggested, or warmer than the world ever gave him credit for. I wondered whether the man who lay here was still the same man everyone thought they knew. I stayed a moment longer than necessary, my fingers lightly brushing the edge of his blanket. The air felt charged again, but not in the same startling way as the night before. More like a quiet shift, a faint hum in the walls, something waiting. I whispered, "Good night, Julian." As I turned to leave, the monitor rose by a single beat. 73. Just one. Enough to stop me cold in my tracks. Enough to make my heart lift despite every warning I had given myself. Enough to make me whisper back into the dim light of the room, "I hear you too." The next night, I walked into 17A with my heart already beating faster than it should have. I kept telling myself not to look for signs, not to project hope onto someone whose prognosis had not changed, no matter how many nurses rotated through that door. But something in me had shifted, something I could not name. Something small and trembling like a candle flame that refused to die even when the world around it insisted the wind was too strong. I stood there for a moment, my hand on the doorframe, steadying myself before stepping inside. The room was dimmer than usual, the curtains pulled slightly to block the glow from the parking lot lamps outside. It made everything feel softer, somehow quieter, more intimate in a way that made my breath catch. Julian lay exactly as I had left him, the rise and fall of his chest, the soft hum of the ventilator support, the stubborn stillness of a body held somewhere between this world and someplace I could not reach. I set down the basin, my hands moving with practiced motions. But inside me was anything but practiced. My thoughts were scattered, looping, filled with a cautious anticipation I refused to acknowledge aloud. I approached the bed slowly and said, "I am here, Julian." The monitor stayed steady, the green line moving in its calm, rhythmic waves. I began the usual tasks, checking his IV, adjusting the angle of the bed slightly to prevent stiffness. I worked carefully, slowly, almost reverently. I felt foolish for expecting anything, but the truth was that last night's single beat increase had stayed with me all day, like a secret meant only for the two of us. When I reached for his wrist to check circulation, my thumb brushing along the edge of his palm, something happened. His fingers curled again, not abruptly, not spasmodically, slowly, intentionally, deliberately. I froze. I stared at his hand, at the subtle tension forming beneath his skin, the undeniable pressure of his fingertips trying to touch mine. For a moment, everything in the room ceased to exist. The machines, the air vents, the distant announcements over the hospital intercom. It felt like there was only him and me and the space between us that had just changed forever. "Julian," I breathed barely above a whisper. "Can you hear me?" His fingers tightened once more, just enough to make a shiver run down my back. Not a reflex, not a fluke, a response. A real response. I felt tears sting behind my eyes, the shock overwhelming. My first instinct was to call someone to activate the neurological protocol to press the button that would summon a rush of doctors and shifting lights and clipped voices reciting procedures. But something stopped me, a very real and very human instinct to protect this moment, not to let it be swallowed by medical chaos before I understood what it truly was. So instead, I leaned in closer and said softly, "If you can hear me, you are doing so well." His fingers relaxed again, returning to their stillness. I waited, breath held, wondering if he would move again. But the moment had passed. I should have stepped out to tell someone, yet I found myself unable to leave the room. I needed more. I needed to be sure. I lifted the cloth and began bathing his arm, the warm water gliding across his skin. As the cloth reached the inside of his elbow, the monitor ticked up by 2 beats. I felt it in my chest like a spark catching fire. I continued wiping slowly, speaking softly as I did. Today was another long day. I got lectured again by Latham. He told me I am too slow with VIP protocols. I think that is code for he does not like me very much. The monitor rose by another beat. 76 now. 3 above baseline. My breath caught a second time. I kept talking, half afraid to stop, half afraid of what each new word might cause. I know you cannot tell me to stop rambling, so lucky you, I murmured with a shaky smile. But the hospital was cold today, and the break room coffee tasted like burnt pennies, and the only peaceful moment I had was coming here. 77. Another beat. Steady. Certain. Impactful in a way that made the room feel smaller. Warmer, more charged. I swallowed hard. Julian, if you can hear me, give me something. Anything. A sign. He did not move his hand again, but the faint flutter beneath his eyelids, the almost imperceptible twitch at the corner of his mouth, the shift in his breathing, all spoke louder than any full movement could have. He could hear me. He could feel me. He was trying. I placed the cloth back into the basin and stepped close enough that my shadow crossed over his blanket. I whispered, I am here. You are not alone. His chest rose slightly deeper, as though he were taking a fuller breath. I covered my mouth with my hand, afraid I might break if I let myself feel everything at once. The world outside this room had been merciless lately, filled with sharp edges and careless words, and the suffocating grind of trying to stay afloat when life keeps pushing you under. But here, in this dim, quiet room, something different was happening. Something fragile. Something miraculous. Something real. The thought of reporting this again filled me with dread after how casually they dismissed me last time. They would call it reflex, coincidence, wishful thinking from an overworked night nurse. I could already hear the condescending tones. I could already see the rolled eyes. So I told him instead, I promise I will not let anyone ignore you again. The monitor rose by one more beat. 78. Then slowly drifted back to 75, as though settling into a steady hum of awareness. I stood there for several minutes absorbing the weight of what had just happened. I had touched him, and he had touched back. I had spoken, and his body answered. A man who had not moved in 11 months was responding. To me. Because I showed up. Because I talked to him. Because I cared. When I finally left the room, I walked down the hallway with trembling hands and a heart that felt too full for my chest. Something had awakened tonight, in him, and maybe quietly in me too. When I walked into 17A the next evening, I carried a knot of nerves so tight it felt like a second heartbeat pulsing under my ribs. I kept replaying every moment from the night before, every movement of his fingers, every shift in his breathing, every rise and fall on the monitor that seemed too deliberate to ignore. Part of me wanted to run straight to Dr. Rowan and demand a full neurological reassessment. Another part, the part I barely admitted to myself, feared the possibility of being wrong, of hearing again that it was nothing more than involuntary spasms and wishful thinking. The truth was simpler. I needed to see him. I needed to know. The door slid open with a quiet hiss, and I stepped inside. The room was unusually warm, the air fragrant with the soft hint of eucalyptus the night staff used on the VIP floor. The lights were dimmed to their lowest setting, creating a gentle amber glow that cast long shadows across the foot of the bed. Julian lay still unchanged at first glance, but something felt different before I even approached. A heaviness pressed into the atmosphere as if the air itself had thickened, waiting for something holding its breath, the same way I suddenly found myself holding mine. I set down the basin and murmured, I am here, Julian. The monitor hummed steadily, the same rhythmic pattern, the same familiar sound that filled the quiet moments between my words. I moved around the bed to adjust his blanket. My hand brushed his forearm. A single beat spike appeared on the monitor. Only one, fast. Sharp, precise. My heart jumped to my throat. "Julian, can you hear me?" I whispered. Another spike. That was all the confirmation I needed. My hands trembled as I adjusted the basin, dipping the cloth in warm water and wringing it out, slowly feeling the heat soak into my palms. I breathed deeply, trying to steady myself. Then I began wiping his shoulder, my movements gentle, deliberate, almost reverent. His eyelids fluttered. I froze. I stared. I waited, breath caught somewhere painfully high in my chest. His lashes trembled again, more pronounced this time. Not random, not reflexive. A flicker of life trying to surface. "Julian," I whispered, leaning closer. "It is all right. You are safe. I am here." His eyelids opened. Slowly. He blinked once, twice, as though trying to remember how to return to a world he had been absent from for nearly a year. His irises were a deep-washed gray, at first unfocused and clouded with confusion. But then his eyes found mine. Locked onto mine. My knees weakened, a jolt of shock rushing through me so violently I had to grip the edge of the mattress to steady myself. His lips parted dry and unmoving except for the faint effort of trying to speak. The sound that came out was barely audible, a rough whisper dragged from the farthest corner of consciousness. "Who are you?" Tears pricked instantly behind my eyes. Relief, fear, awe, all crashing together so fiercely it was hard to breathe. I swallowed hard and whispered, "My name is Clara. I am your nurse." His gaze drifted slightly as if struggling to hold on to the details of the moment, then snapped back to my face with a fragile focus. He blinked again, slower this time. "Clara." He repeated the name barely shaped by his lips, but unmistakably intentional. A tear slid down my cheek, uninvited, unstoppable. I gently set down the cloth and hovered my hand near his, giving him space, but silently begging for him to reach back. He tried. His fingers twitched, then curled around mine with the slightest pressure, weak and trembling but deliberate. Heat flooded my chest. Something bright and overwhelming, something that felt like witnessing a sunrise after believing you would never see light again. His breathing quickened. The monitor beeped in faster intervals, steady but elevated. Not distress. Awareness. I whispered, "You are okay. You are safe. You are here." His brows knit slightly, a faint crease appearing as if he were trying to piece together memories buried behind fog. "How long?" he rasped. 11 months, I whispered. His eyes widened with a flicker of fear and disbelief, then exhaustion. His eyelids drooped for a moment, but lifted again when I squeezed his hand. "It is all right," I murmured. "You do not have to remember everything now. Just breathe. You are here. You are awake." The room suddenly felt too still, too fragile for the enormity of what was happening. I pressed the emergency call button on the wall. A red light blinked. A distant alarm chimed. Footsteps thundered down the hall. Dr. Rowan burst into the room, followed by 2 nurses from the neuro team. Their eyes widened at the sight of him, awake alert, holding on to my hand like it was the only thing anchoring him to this world. Rowan moved quickly to his side. "Julian, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" Julian's gaze flickered toward the doctor, then back to me. He held onto my hand tighter. My throat tightened painfully. Rowan lifted a penlight, checking pupillary responses, asking questions, taking notes in rapid murmurs. But through it all, through the whirl of medical urgency and professional awe, Julian's eyes kept drifting back to mine, back to the person he had seen first, back to the voice that had been reaching for him long before his eyes opened. As the room filled with the controlled chaos of medical evaluation, Julian whispered again, softer this time, like a secret being formed. "Clara." His voice trembled. I did not know why it mattered that he remembered me, or at least remembered the sound of me, but it did. It mattered more than I could explain even to myself. When the tests finally slowed and Rowan stepped back to dictate notes into his recorder, I found myself still holding Julian's hand. He did not let go. I did not either. The doctor glanced at me with an expression I could not quite read, something between curiosity and recognition, as if he understood that something had happened here long before he walked in. Something that did not fit neatly into charts and protocols. Something human. Something impossible. Something real. When they prepared to transport Julian for scans, he clung to my hand weakly, his eyelids fluttering again with exhaustion. "Do not go," he whispered. I leaned closer, letting my voice fall into the space between us like a promise. "I am not going anywhere." As they wheeled him out, his hand slipped from mine, slowly, reluctantly, as though the connection between us stretched until the very last moment. I stood in the doorway watching him disappear down the hall, the hum of the monitors echoing away, leaving the room empty and trembling with the memory of what had just happened. His eyes had opened, he had spoken, and the first person he saw was me. The hospital changed the second Julian opened his eyes. News traveled fast in places like this, even when it was supposed to remain confidential, even when the administration tried to keep the floor sealed and limit access. A patient waking from an 11-month coma was the kind of phenomenon that spread like electricity through the walls. People whispered, people speculated, people watched me differently, though no one said anything directly. They did not have to. Their eyes followed me when I walked down the hall that morning, and every look carried the same unspoken question. Why him? Why now? Why with you? I tried to ignore it, tried to stay in motion, tried not to let the scrutiny sink under my skin. But the truth was that I was shaken too, trembling inside in ways I could not name. I spent half the morning in a fog, my hands moving mechanically through routine tasks while my mind replayed every moment from the night before. The way his eyelids fluttered, the way his voice rasped my name, the way his fingers curled around mine as if holding on to life itself, the way he refused to look away from me even when surrounded by doctors. There was a gravity in that moment I could still feel pulling at me hours later. I tried to anchor myself by focusing on the present. My shift started with organizing medications, checking vitals, ensuring post-op rooms were stocked. But every time I turned a corner, I found myself glancing toward the elevator that led to the imaging wing, wondering if he was still there, wondering if he was awake, wondering if he remembered me. When I finally walked down to radiology to check on him, I told myself it was only to deliver the chart update Rowan requested, nothing more. The corridor was cold, lined with metallic cabinets and low humming machines, the kind of hallway where everything echoed even when no one was speaking. I found him in the recovery area outside the scanning suite, propped slightly upright in the hospital bed, his eyes half closed in exhaustion. For a moment, I stood there silently watching the way the soft overhead lights shaped his profile. He looked fragile and strong at the same time, like someone trying to relearn how to exist in a world that had moved on without him. I approached quietly. "Julian." His eyes opened slowly, then focused on me with a clarity that sent a rush of warmth through my chest. "Clara." He said my name the way one might say water after a drought. Soft, searching, grateful. I stepped closer, checking the lines and monitors, automatically grateful for the distraction, grateful that the routine kept my hands from shaking too visibly. "How do you feel?" He swallowed with effort. "Tired. Heavy." "But here." I nodded, unable to keep the small smile from pulling at my mouth. "You scared all of us," I whispered. He blinked, brows furrowing faintly. "What happened?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "You woke up. You grabbed my hand. You spoke." His eyes shifted slightly, searching inward, trying to assemble memories that remained out of reach. "The doctor said I should remember things slowly. Pieces, flashes. I am not sure how much of what I saw last night was dream or memory." His voice trailed off. I waited, watching, listening. Then his eyes found mine again. "But I remember you." The words lodged inside me like a held breath. My throat tightened. I forced myself to look away under the weight of his gaze, pretending to check something on the monitor, even though everything was already in perfect order. The neuro team approached, then clipboard in hand, ready to interrupt. They greeted him, began running their assessments, asking him to track their finger, with his eyes squeeze their hands, recall the date, the year, the name of the state. He tried. He failed. Some passed, others grew frustrated at the ones he could not answer. But every few minutes his eyes drifted back to me, as if I were the only familiar thing in the room. When the tests finished, they wheeled him upstairs again. He dozed off on the way, exhaustion pulling him under. They placed him back in 17A, now filled with more equipment than before. More wires, more screens, more people observing from the doorway whenever they could get away with it. The room no longer felt quiet. It buzzed with sterile energy. Charts being updated, nurses discussing protocols, physicians murmuring in clipped tones. I stayed near the wall trying not to intrude, even though part of me ached to get closer. When the team finally cleared out, leaving only the soft hum of machines behind, I stepped toward the bed again. The world seemed to exhale all at once, settling into stillness. His eyes were half open, unfocused from fatigue. I whispered, "The tests are done. You can rest now." He blinked slowly, then his gaze found me again. "Will you stay?" The question hit me in a place I did not want to examine too closely. I lowered myself into the chair beside him, unsure whether I was making a mistake, whether I was stepping into something I could not step away from later. I nodded. "Yes, I will stay." He watched me quietly for a moment, as if memorizing the fact that I was real, that I was sitting there, that I had not disappeared when the doctors left. He whispered, "I remember a voice." I waited. His brow creased. A voice talking to me when everything was dark. A voice that made me feel like I was not lost. My pulse quickened. What did it say? He closed his eyes, concentrating. Something like, "You are not alone. You are here." His words struck me with the force of recognition. Because I had said those exact things, not once, but dozens of times in the silence of this room when I thought no one heard me. His eyes opened again, softer now. "Was that you?" I swallowed hard. "Yes." His chest rose shakily, something emotional pressing behind his eyes. "Thank you." The words were fragile, hoarse, barely a whisper, but they held a depth I was not prepared for. I sat there with him for a long time, saying nothing, just breathing in the quiet, letting the magnitude of the moment settle. The hospital outside kept moving. Machines beeped, nurses traded shifts, doors opened and closed, but inside, 17A, everything felt still, sacred, changed. Julian had returned to the world. And somehow, impossibly, his first tether back had been me. The following days unfolded in a strange mixture of chaos and quiet, like two different worlds overlapping and refusing to separate. On the surface, everything was clinical. Doctors streamed in and out of 17A, running cognitive tests, adjusting medications, assessing muscle atrophy, dictating notes, ordering scans. Administrators hovered too, pretending they were there for oversight, when in reality they were waiting for a miracle they could use in the next board meeting. But beneath all of that, there was a softer current, a steady pull, a quiet recognition that grew stronger each time Julian looked at me with those searching, uncertain eyes. I found myself drawn back to his room whenever my shift allowed it, sometimes even when it technically did not. Not because he needed constant monitoring, but because something about his presence tugged at me in a way I could not rationalize. He was awake, but still drifting between fog and clarity, his mind slowly clawing its way back from the darkness it had lived in for almost a year. Every day brought questions he struggled to answer, memories he tried to piece together, fears that surfaced without warning. And every day, almost without exception, his eyes drifted toward me as if asking, "Am I safe? Am I real? Am I still here?" On the fourth evening since he woke up, I stepped inside to find him sitting upright in bed, supported by extra pillows. His hair had been trimmed by one of the nurses, making him look more like the man the news once showed, and less like the ghost he had become. But what stopped me wasn't the change in his appearance. It was the expression on his face. His eyes were distant, unfocused, yet intent, as if he were chasing something deep in his mind that kept slipping away every time he reached for it. I approached slowly. "Julian." His head lifted. His gaze locked onto mine so fast it almost startled me. "Clara." He said my name like an anchor, like something he depended on to stay rooted in the moment. I sat beside him. "Are you all right?" He blinked, his throat bobbing. "I think I remembered something." The room stilled around us. I leaned forward slightly, pulse quickening. "What did you remember?" His fingers curled over the blanket, gripping it with visible tension. I was in my car. It was raining. Hard. The road was black and shining. Headlights coming toward me. He paused, inhaling shakily. His eyes drifted somewhere past my shoulder into a space only he could see. I remember turning the wheel, the brakes. Something was wrong. They did not respond. They did not slow the car. His chest rose sharply, breath catching. His hands trembled. That was not the first time I had seen panic in a patient's eyes. But this was different. This was someone reliving a moment that had nearly taken his life. Someone who had been trapped in silence for 11 months and was now feeling everything at once. I reached out instinctively, covering his hand gently with mine. "Julian, it is okay. You are here. You are safe." His eyes snapped back to me, wide, vulnerable, frightened in a way that broke something in my chest. He whispered, "Someone tampered with them." I froze. My breath stopped. "What?" His voice was barely audible. The brakes. They did not fail on their own. Someone wanted me off that road. A cold shiver ran down my spine. The idea was terrifying, unthinkable, but the certainty in his voice was unmistakable. He was not guessing. He was remembering. I steadied my voice. "Do you remember who?" He shook his head, frustration flickering across his face. "No, just flashes, the rain, the headlights, and a figure, a man on the side of the road, watching, not helping, just watching." His breathing quickened again. I squeezed his hand gently. "It is all right. You do not have to force it. The memories will come in pieces. Let them come at their own pace." His shoulders slumped slightly, tension easing just enough that he could breathe again. I stayed with him in silence for a moment, letting him ground himself. Outside the window, the sky was painted in indigo and silver, the city lights blinking like distant stars. After a while, he spoke again softer. "The darkness was endless." He closed his eyes, swallowing hard. "I kept hearing your voice in it." At that, my breath caught. "Me." His voice grew quieter. "You kept saying I was not alone, that I was here, and there were nights where that was the only thing I held on to." He opened his eyes again, and the look he gave me was something I could not fully understand, something tender, something raw, something unguarded. I felt heat rise up my neck, my heartbeat thudding in a way I struggled to conceal. I whispered, "I only said those things because I meant them." His gaze softened something warm, stirring in the depths of his tired eyes. Suddenly the door opened. Dr. Rowan entered, flipping through a tablet. He greeted Julian with a professional tone, jotting down observations as he checked vitals. Meanwhile, I stepped back to give space, but I could feel Julian's eyes lingering on me even while the doctor spoke. Rowan asked questions in rapid succession. "Can you tell me your full name? Do you remember what year it is? Do you have any recollection of the accident?" Julian answered. What he could falter at others grew visibly frustrated when his mind refused to cooperate. The doctor reassured him and adjusted his medication. But even as Rowan moved around the room, Julian kept watching me. Not the machines, not the doctor. Me. When Rowan finally left, I approached the bed again. Julian let out a slow breath. His voice dropped to a near whisper. "Do not leave yet." I sat back down. "I will stay a little longer." He closed his eyes, relief washing over his features like a soft wave. For the next half hour, the world outside 17A faded away. It was just the two of us, breathing in the quiet, watching the shadows shift on the wall, feeling the unspoken connection grow stronger in the stillness between words. When I finally rose to leave, he reached for my hand again. This time his fingers tightened with surprising clarity, surprising intent. "Do not go far," he murmured. I leaned closer and whispered, "I will not." And as I stepped into the hallway, the truth settled deep in my chest like something inevitable. Julian Hale was remembering his past, and somehow, impossibly, I had become part of his present. The shift began before the sun even rose, the early morning haze still clinging to the hospital windows like a thin layer of sleep no one had bothered to wipe away. I walked through the corridors with a cup of bitter coffee in my hand, hoping it would steady my nerves, though I doubted anything could fully steady me now. Everything felt different. Not because the hospital had changed, but because Julian had. Because I had. Because whatever lay between us had begun taking shape in a way I could neither define nor push away. When I reached 17A, I paused before entering, taking a slow, grounding breath. I was not sure what I would find this morning. Another memory, another fear, another shift in the dynamic between us. I pushed open the door. Julian was awake, not groggy awake, not confused awake, fully awake. Sitting upright, gaze focused, shoulders squared with a quiet determination that sent a pulse of surprise through me. He lifted his head the moment he heard my footsteps. Clara. Hearing my name from him still hit me like a soft impact, something gentle yet powerful enough to unsettle my breathing. Good morning, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Did you sleep any better? Slightly. His gaze stayed on me, searching, assessing the way someone might look at sunlight after a long night. I crossed the room to check his vitals, but I could feel his eyes on me with every step, every movement, every brush of fabric as I adjusted his blanket. When I placed my hand lightly on his wrist to check circulation, he inhaled sharply. Not in pain, in awareness. Something in the air shifted almost audible. I cleared my throat lightly, trying to focus. Your vitals are strong. Better than yesterday. He nodded, but the look on his face said his mind was far from the numbers on the monitors. Yesterday. Something changed, he murmured. My pulse stumbled. What do you mean? He hesitated, searching for words. It feels like my mind is waking up, not just from the coma, from everything. Like fog is lifting and pieces are moving into place again. I stepped closer. That is good. That means your brain is reconnecting pathways. His expression tightened faintly. Clara, I do not mean just memories. I mean everything. The way I feel, the way things look, the way it felt when you walked in. My breath caught, but I managed to keep my voice calm. What did it feel like? He stared at me for a moment, and the silence stretched into something tense and intimate at the same time. Like the room made sense, he whispered. Like I made sense. My throat tightened. I tried to look away to break the intensity, but his voice followed me softly. Stay. I stopped moving. I turned back. I am here. His shoulders relaxed, the tension melting just slightly, but his eyes stayed locked on mine. Something warm rippled through me, settling low in my chest. Before either of us could say more, Dr. Rowan entered with his usual clipboard and brisk tone, snapping the moment apart like a fragile thread. Morning, Julian. We have some cognitive assessments to run today. I stepped back, falling into my professional posture even though my heart was still unsteady. Rowan asked questions, lifting his pen light, checking reflexes, instructing Julian to squeeze his fingers. Follow patterns, name objects. Julian completed most of them with surprising clarity. Then Rowan handed him a small booklet. Picture recall. Describe what you see. Julian flipped through it slowly, brow furrowing. He identified most images correctly, but a few caused him to pause, staring at them with discomfort. One photo made him stop completely. A car, broken twisted metal, rain on pavement. His grip tightened on the booklet. His breathing changed. I stepped forward instinctively. Julian. His eyes darted to me, panic flickering across his features. Rowan noticed. Do you remember something? Julian swallowed hard. Yes. No. Part of it. I remember fear. His hand trembled. And someone watching me. Rowan exchanged a quick glance with me. I kept my face neutral, but inside, dread coiled like a warning. After a few more tests, the doctor excused himself, leaving us alone again. The moment the door closed, tension filled the room like a slow rising tide. Julian stared at his hands for a long moment, then looked up at me. It was not an accident, Clara. His voice was low, thick with certainty. I feel it. Someone wanted me gone. Someone who knew me. Someone close. My breath chilled. Do you remember who? He shook his head slowly, frustration darkening his expression. Not yet, but I will. When I approached to adjust his pillow, he caught my wrist gently. Not forceful, not desperate, just enough pressure to anchor us both. Clara. I looked at him, really looked, and the truth thrummed between us, unspoken but unmistakable. This connection was no longer just nurse and patient. It had become something deeper, something fragile, something neither of us was ready to name. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. When I was gone, when everything was dark, I heard you. Your voice, your words, your warmth. I felt you before I ever saw you. My heart tightened painfully. Julian. He lifted our hands slightly, his fingers brushing along mine. You kept me alive. I held my breath, afraid to break the moment, afraid to let him spiral, afraid of what this shift meant for both of us. Before I could respond, he continued softly, and now that I am awake, everything in me keeps reaching for you. The words hit me with the force of a confession I was not prepared for. My pulse stuttered, my breath hitched, a tremor ran through me. I took a slow, careful breath. Julian, emotions can be complicated after trauma. You are vulnerable. You are still healing. He shook his head. No, this is not confusion. I know confusion. I lived in it for 11 months. This is clarity. This is real. His voice dropped even lower. You are the first thing my mind held on to, and the first thing I want now. The silence that followed felt electric, suspended between us like a held breath. I did not move. I did not speak. I only felt the shift, the awakening, the moment when something dormant became undeniable. When he finally let go of my wrist, my hand lingered there an extra second without meaning to. A second too long, a second that changed everything. As I stepped back, trying to breathe, trying to think, trying to steady myself, Julian whispered the words that echoed in me for the rest of the day. Do not run from this, Clara. I am not confused. I am waking up, and you are the first thing I see clearly. And I knew then whatever was happening between us had only just begun. That night, the hospital felt heavier than usual, as if every hallway had absorbed the weight of someone's secrets and was holding them in its walls. The air smelled faintly of rain drifting in from the storm outside, and the wind rattled the windows with low groans that made the entire building feel alive. I had been restless all shift. Something in the way Julian spoke earlier kept echoing inside me, replaying like a soft whisper I could not ignore. Do not run from this, Clara. I am not confused. I am waking up. I tried to dismiss it as emotional overspill from trauma, but deep down I knew better. Something real was forming between us, real enough that I could feel the truth of it lingering in my chest long after I walked away from his room. I finished the medication rounds faster than usual, half aware of nurses chatting at the station and half lost in spiraling thoughts I couldn't untangle. By the time midnight neared the hallways had settled into the usual hush of the night shift, the lights dimmed the world quieter. A strange tug pulled me toward 17A before I even decided to go there. When I reached the door, I paused with my fingers hovering above the handle. I told myself I was checking on him out of professional duty, but the soft thudding in my chest insisted otherwise. I pushed the door open. Julian wasn't asleep. He was sitting upright, eyes wide, chest rising quickly as if he had been holding his breath for too long. His hair was damp with sweat. His hands trembled slightly against the sheets. The look he gave me when I entered was not the quiet recognition he usually offered. It was fear, raw, shaking fear. Clara, he whispered, his voice breaking on my name. I hurried to him. Julian, what is wrong? He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breathing. I remembered something more. I gently placed my hand on his forearm. Tell me. A long, trembling silence stretched between us before he finally spoke. It came back like a shock, like lightning, all at once. His gaze drifted toward the window as if watching the storm outside helped him recall the storm he survived. I was driving. It was late, maybe past midnight. I had just left a meeting. Something about it felt wrong. Like someone watching me, following me. I leaned closer, my breath caught. What happened next? His jaw clenched, his voice dropped, growing hoarse. I saw headlights behind me. Too close, too fast. I changed lanes, They followed. My heart pounded. And then I heard the sound. Metal grinding. Something snapping. The brakes. They did not respond. His hands shook harder now, his breathing unsteady. I turned the wheel. The car skidded. There was a man on the side of the road, standing there, watching. His fingers tightened on the blanket until his knuckles turned white. He did nothing, Clara. Nothing. He just watched. My stomach twisted at the image. The storm outside cracked with thunder rattling the windows. I steadied my voice. "Do you know who he was?" He closed his eyes, pain flickering across his face. "No, just a shape, a shadow. But he knew me. I felt it. He wasn't a stranger." A chill crawled down my spine. I shifted closer, instinctively reaching for his hand. He gripped mine like it was the only solid thing left in his world. His voice cracked. "Someone I trusted wanted me dead." I squeezed his hand gently. "We will figure it out. You are not alone anymore." He opened his eyes then, and the storm outside seemed tame compared to the intensity in them. "I am afraid, Clara." His voice wavered. "For the first time since waking up, I'm afraid of what I might remember next. And I'm afraid of who it will be." Something in his vulnerability pulled at me with a force I could not resist. Without thinking, I sat on the edge of the bed and brought my other hand to rest lightly against his shoulder. "You do not have to face it alone. I am right here." His breath softened. His gaze softened. The tremble in his hands eased just slightly under my touch. For a moment, the world fell silent. No rain, no thunder, no machines, just the faint sound of two people breathing in the dim light of a room filled with unspoken truths. He whispered, "Clara," and something in the way he said my name held a longing so fragile and real that I felt myself leaning closer before I even realized it. Then he exhaled sharply, eyes darting to the side, haunted by something he had not yet shared. "There's more," he murmured. My heart raced. "What else do you remember?" His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Someone was in the car with me earlier that night." My blood ran cold. "Who?" He shook his head weakly. "I don't know their face. Just a feeling. A presence. Someone angry. Someone who felt betrayed. Someone who said—" He paused, his chest tightening. He said, "You should have stayed in your place." Ice slid down my spine. Fear flickered in Julian's eyes like a shadow growing larger, darker. The storm outside roared again, thunder cracking across the sky, like the universe echoing his fear. I squeezed both his hands with steady pressure, grounding him, anchoring him. "Julian, you're safe now. Whoever did this, whoever wanted you gone, they failed. And you're going to remember the truth, all of it, even if it hurts." He stared at me as if trying to decide whether he could believe that, whether he could believe me. And then he whispered softer than a heartbeat, "I trust you, Clara, more than anyone." The words hit me in the chest with a force I could not hide from. Before I could speak, his breathing slowed again, exhaustion rolling over him like a heavy tide. His eyes drifted shut, his grip slowly loosening but never fully releasing my hand. He murmured, "Stay until I fall asleep. Please." I stayed, long after his breathing evened out, long after the storm quieted outside, long after I knew I should have walked away, but the truth was undeniable. Something in him needed me, and something in me needed him just as much. And as I sat beside his bed watching a man who survived the unimaginable sleep peacefully for the first time since waking, a realization settled inside me with a clarity I could no longer deny. Julian Hale had not just come back to life. He was pulling me into it with him. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness, the kind that feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I walked into the hospital with a tightness in my chest I could not quite name, a sense that whatever Julian remembered last night had only been the beginning. As I turned the corner into the neurology wing, I noticed two men in suits standing near the nurse station whispering in low voices. They didn't look like visitors. They looked like watchers. Their eyes tracked every movement in the hallway. I kept my head down and moved quickly toward 17A. my pulse thudding faster with every step. When I pushed open the door, Julian was awake, sitting upright as if he had been waiting for me. His hair was damp from a recent bath, his hands clasped together tightly. The moment our eyes met, he exhaled with visible relief. "Clara." His voice carried something fragile, something raw. I closed the door behind me, suddenly aware of how exposed the room felt. "Are you all right?" He shook his head slightly. "Not exactly." He looked toward the window, jaw-clenched muscles tense. "Something happened last night. After you left." My heart lurched. What happened? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration pulling at the corners of his mouth. "Someone was outside my door." I frowned. "A nurse? A doctor?" "No." His voice dropped firm. "A man." He pressed his lips together, searching for the right words. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching. My stomach twisted. What did he look like? Tall, dark jacket. Couldn't see his face clearly, but he moved like he knew the place, like he belonged. I hesitated, then asked the question that terrified me. "Do you think it's the same man from the crash?" Julian flinched, almost imperceptibly. "I don't know, but the way he stood there, it felt the same. The same presence. The same coldness." My breath caught. "Did you tell Dr. Pierce?" Julian shook his head sharply. "No, I do not trust anyone right now, except you." His eyes locked onto mine with a certainty that sent a tremor through my chest. Before I could respond, a knock sounded at the door. We both stiffened. I turned. It was only a nurse bringing his breakfast tray, but Julian's shoulders didn't drop. Even after she left, the air remained tense. He pushed the food away untouched. I sat beside him and spoke softly. "Julian, you're safe here." He shook his head immediately. "No, Clara, I am not." He lowered his voice, leaning closer. I remembered something else. My breath tightened. "What?" He closed his eyes as if steadying himself. "The night of the accident, before the brakes failed, someone was in the passenger seat earlier that evening, not long before the crash." My pulse hammered. "Who?" His jaw clenched. I can't see the face, but I remember a voice. Low, angry. The same words as before. "You should have stayed in your place." I swallowed hard, a knot forming in my throat. Julian looked at me, eyes filled with a dawning dread. Someone close to me wanted me gone. Someone who felt threatened. Someone who believed I did not deserve what I had built. The words sent a chill across my skin. "Do you have someone like that in your life?" He let out a humorless breath. "It would be easier to ask if there is anyone who does not. Rivals, competitors, but someone that close." He trailed off, panic flickering behind his steady composure. Then his voice softened. "Clara, what if this person knows I'm waking up? What if they know my memories are coming back? What if they are watching me right now?" The fear in his voice was not paranoia. It was instinct, and it made something inside me snap into focus. I reached for his hand before I even thought about it. "You are not facing this alone. I am here." His gaze softened with something that felt dangerously intimate, and for a moment we simply stayed like that. Hands intertwined, breaths synced, hanging on the edge of something neither of us dared name. A sudden sound in the hallway made us both flinch. Footsteps. Heavy, unfamiliar. I turned toward the door, heart pounding. The footsteps slowed near his room, paused, then continued. Julian exhaled shakily. "Clara," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't think I was supposed to survive that night." I tightened my hold on him. "But you did, and whoever did this underestimated you." A faint anger sharpened the line of his jaw. "I want to remember everything, even if it hurts, even if it destroys everything I thought I knew." I nodded. "Then we will do it piece by piece, together." His expression flickered. A mixture of gratitude, fear, and something deeper that neither of us had the courage to call by name. Then a soft buzzing interrupted us. Julian glanced toward the small table beside his bed. "A phone." I frowned. "That is not yours." He shook his head. "It was not there earlier. My stomach dropped. I picked it up carefully as if it might explode from the wrong touch. No lock screen, no apps. Just one thing in the recent log. One number. A number with no name, no area code, nothing identifiable. But a single notification flashed across the screen at the top. Delivered. Julian's breath caught. Clara! He pointed at the screen, eyes wide. Check the messages. My fingers trembled as I opened the only message thread. One single text sat there. No sender, no signature. Just 4 words that iced my lungs. You should stop digging. Neither of us spoke. Outside, footsteps echoed again. This time slower. Closer. I moved to the window and pulled the curtain slightly to the side. The same 2 men from the nurse station stood in the hallway, watching, not talking, not moving, watching. I whispered, Julian, we're being watched. His face hardened with a resolve I had not seen before. Then we find the truth faster than they can bury it. But as he said the words, the lights in his room flickered once, twice, then went out, leaving us in the dark. The darkness hit the room like a wave, swallowing the familiar outlines of the machines, the bed rails, the IV stand, everything I relied on to feel anchored in this place. For a split second, I could not even hear my own breathing over the rush of panic in my chest. The emergency generator should have kicked on instantly. It did not. The silence felt intentional, like someone had wrapped the entire hospital floor in a thick blanket meant to hide every warning, every clue, every instinct. Julian's hand found mine in the dark, gripping it tight enough to make my pulse leap. Clara, stay close. His voice was low, steady, but I felt the tremor underneath. I leaned toward him so he could hear me. I am right here. My eyes adjusted slowly, just enough to see faint outlines, the emergency strip lights flickering weakly in the hallway outside the door, as if struggling to stay alive. A shadow moved past the glass. Slow, deliberate. My breath snagged in my throat. Julian noticed. What did you see? Someone is out there, I whispered, watching the door. His fingers tightened around mine, and for the first time since he woke up, I felt a current of fear radiate from him. Not for himself, but for me. Clara, lock the door. I hesitated. If I move, they will know where I am. He pulled himself upright, something fierce breaking through the weakness his body still carried. Then, stay here. Do not move. Do not speak. His voice was firmer than I had ever heard. The protective edge in it startled me, cutting through the dark like a blade. Another shadow passed the door. I felt my heartbeat in my throat and my palms everywhere. Seconds stretched. The lights flickered again. This time the soft hum of the emergency generator finally kicked in, flooding the room with a sickly yellow glow. I blinked rapidly, adjusting. The hallway was empty now. Whoever had been there was gone. But the dread they left behind clung to the air like smoke. Julian exhaled shakily. That was not a coincidence. I swallowed. They wanted the cameras off. They wanted the power down. He nodded once. They wanted me defenseless. My chest tightened. And what do you think they wanted from me? He met my gaze, eyes dark and tense. To scare you. To isolate you. To warn you. His jaw hardened. Or keep you quiet. A chill crawled down my spine. I sat beside him again, unable to mask the fear anymore. Julian watched me for a long moment, his expression shifting from tension to something softer, deeper. Clara, come here. The way he said it cut through every barrier I had built. I moved toward him slowly, as if pulled by gravity. He reached up his fingers, brushing my cheek, tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made my breath catch. You did not have to stay last night, he said quietly. But you did. You are still here. Even though this is dangerous, even though I barely understand what is happening, even though any of this could put you in the middle of something dark. His voice trembled. Why? I opened my mouth, but the words stuck in my throat. Why was I still here? Why did I care this much? Why did he matter this deeply already? I swallowed hard, trying to push through it. Because you are not alone in this. And because someone tried to take your life. And because leaving you now feels wrong on a level I cannot explain. His eyes softened in a way that sent heat rushing through my chest. He lifted his hand again and gently took mine. You are the only person I trust. The only one who feels real. The only one who seems to see me as more than a name on a headline. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. Clara, you are the only one I woke up for. The air thickened with something that was not fear anymore. Something charged. Something fragile and powerful at once. I felt myself drawn in helpless against it, but he paused, searching my face as if afraid of crossing a line. I had to say something. Julian, I need you to understand something. You are vulnerable. You are recovering. You are still remembering who you are, and emotions can get tangled in all of that. You might think you feel something, but it might not be real. He shook his head firmly. No, I know what confusion feels like. I lived in it for almost a year. This is not confusion. This is clarity. He looked at me like I was a truth he had been searching for. I felt my resolve crack piece by fragile piece. I had heard patients confess things under stress before. I had seen trauma twist emotions. But something in the way he looked at me made every warning I tried to cling to crumble. Still, I tried again. Julian, I am your nurse. That matters. It creates lines, boundaries. He shook his head slowly. You were more than a nurse long before I opened my eyes. He lifted my hand and placed it lightly over his chest, right where his heartbeat thrummed beneath my palm. I heard you, Clara. In the dark. You pulled me back. You were my tether when everything else slipped away. I inhaled sharply. The warmth of him, the sincerity in his voice, the way his eyes held mine without flinching. It all pulled something loose inside me. The fear in the room slowly folded into something else. Something warm. Something dangerous. Something undeniable. The generator lights flickered again, but neither of us looked away. He whispered, Clara, I need you, not just because I'm scared, not because I'm weak, but because something in me wakes up every time you walk into this room. My heartbeat stumbled. My breath caught. My whole world seemed to tilt. I spoke barely above a whisper. Julian, this is not the right moment. He held my gaze. Then, tell me when it is, and I will wait for you. The honesty in his voice broke something open in my chest. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since this all began, I let myself admit what had been growing between us. Fear had brought us here, but something else was holding us together now, something neither of us was ready to let go of. And as the lights finally steadied, casting the room in soft illumination once more, I realized with a trembling certainty that whatever was coming next, we would face it together. The names surfaced on a quiet morning that should have felt ordinary, but nothing about my life had been ordinary since the moment Julian Hale opened his eyes. The hospital hallways hummed with their usual rhythm nurses, exchanging charts, the scent of antiseptic drifting lightly through the air. But beneath it all was an undercurrent of tension I had grown used to feeling in my bones. Something about the way security lingered near the elevators, the way unfamiliar men passed through the corridor pretending not to look into Julian's room felt like a warning wrapped in polite silence. When I stepped into 17A, Julian was sitting upright with a focused expression that immediately told me something had shifted again. His hands were clasped together, his posture rigid, his eyes distant as if holding on to something fragile and newly found. I closed the door quietly. Tell me, I said. What happened? He did not look at me at first. Instead, he looked down at his hands, turning them over, once studying the faint tremble in them. Then he lifted his gaze slowly, and the intensity there made my breath catch. I remembered another voice he said quietly, from the night of the crash. My pulse quickened, the voice in the car. He nodded once. His chest rose and fell faster. I heard him say my name, his lips parted, tension flickering across his face. And I remembered something else. He was angry, furious. He kept repeating a single phrase like a warning. You should have stayed out of it. My blood ran cold. Out of what? Julian shook his head. I do not know yet. But I know this part. The man knew me well. Too well. My stomach tightened. Someone close. Someone inside his life. Inside his world. Inside his trust. Then Julian inhaled sharply and spoke the words that made everything tilt. I think I know who it was. My heart lodged in my throat. Who? His jaw locked. His voice came out low and edged with betrayal. Lyle. I frowned. Lyle? As in Lyle Granger. Your business partner. Your childhood friend. The man who has been handling everything since your coma. His eyes darkened. Yes, him. For a moment, I could not speak. I replayed every detail I had ever read or overheard about Lyle Granger. The polished smiles, the perfect suits, the flawless PR statements about Julian's condition, the way he had been the one controlling the narrative, controlling access, controlling everything. A strange feeling washed through me as if puzzle pieces I didn't know existed had started snapping together. What makes you think it was him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Julian swallowed hard. The voice, the tone, the cadence. I would know it anywhere. We grew up together. I trusted him more than anyone. But there was something else. Something he said once before the accident. A warning I ignored. Julian leaned back, closing his eyes as his memory sharpened. A few days before the crash, we had an argument. He wanted to push through a merger that I believed was unethical. I threatened to pull out of it entirely. He told me. His eyes opened again, meeting mine with a weight that made my chest ache. He told me he built everything with me and he would not let me walk away. My breath shuddered. That does not mean he would try to... Julian cut me off. Clara. The brakes were tampered with. The shadow on the road watched me die. A man was in my car the same night, and the voice was his. I felt my skin prickle with cold. The truth was forming undeniable and dangerous. Before I could respond, a sharp knock rattled the door. Julian flinched. I stood quickly. I will see who it is. When I cracked the door open, my stomach bottomed out. Standing there, perfectly composed in an immaculate charcoal suit, was Lyle Granger. His smile was polite, warm, even, but his eyes flicked past me toward Julian with a sharpness that made every instinct inside me scream. Clara Wright, he said smoothly. Julian's nurse? I forced a neutral expression. Yes. He gave me a professional nod. I am here to see Julian. It has been a while. He said the words easily, casually, but there was something rehearsed about his tone, something too polished, too controlled. I hesitated. Julian came up behind me, his presence close enough that I felt the heat of his body. Let him in, Clara, he murmured, his voice tight. It is all right. I stepped aside reluctantly. Lyle walked in as if he owned the room. His gaze swept Julian's frame with theatrical concern. My God, Julian, seeing you awake is... His voice broke for show, but I watched Julian's reaction instead. His expression was blank cold, carefully guarded. Not an ounce of warmth, not an ounce of trust. Lyle stepped closer. I cannot believe you are really back. Julian held his stare unmoving. Funny. You did not visit much in the last 11 months. Lyle's smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back into place. I wanted to give you space, and the company needed stability. You know how it is. Julian did not blink. Do I? Lyle shifted slightly, masking discomfort with a tight laugh. Well, things were tense before the accident. We should talk privately about all that. Julian shook his head slowly. We will talk now, with Clara here. My pulse leapt. Lyle glanced at me, his smile thinning. I do not think that is necess... Julian interrupted him, voice calm but lethal. Clara stays. A beat of silence. Lyle folded his hands together, the smile dropping entirely. Fine. He exhaled sharply, the pretense slipping. Just like before you let emotion cloud your judgment. I stiffened. Julian's eyes turned glacial. And you let ambition cloud yours. Lyle's jaw tightened. This merger is bigger than you, bigger than either of us. You cannot walk away now. Julian's voice lowered into something dark and steady. I never walked away. I was forced away. The air froze. Lyle blinked slowly. What are you implying? Julian's expression did not change. You were in my car the night of the crash. Lyle's face drained of color. That is absurd. You left something behind. Julian's voice sharpened like a blade. A phrase you always used. Lyle's hands curled. You should have stayed out of it, Julian. My stomach dropped. He said it. He actually said it. Julian's breath shuddered as the final puzzle piece fell into place. I knew it. Lyle realized too late what he had revealed. His facade cracked dread spilling across his features. He took one step backward. You do not understand what you are getting into, Julian. You cannot prove any of this, and you certainly cannot stop what is coming. I stepped forward, fury rising in my throat. You tried to kill him! Lyle turned his deadened eyes on me. You should stay out of this, Clara. My blood iced. He was the shadow. He was the watcher. He was the man outside the room. Julian moved instinctively, stepping between us despite his weakened body. Do not talk to her. She saved me. She is the reason I am alive. Lyle's expression twisted with something dark and unmasked. Then maybe I should have gotten rid of her too. The room fell silent, the air suffocating, every truth laid bare. And in that moment, I knew one thing without a shred of doubt. This was far from over. But the man who tried to kill Julian Hale had just said the one thing that would bring him down. His own name. Everything that followed happened so quickly, it blurred at the edges like the final pages of a story written too fast to keep the ink from bleeding, yet clear enough that every moment carved itself into my memory with permanent force. Lyle's threat, sharp as broken glass, still hung in the air when the door behind him burst open and 2 hospital security officers stepped inside, followed by Dr. Pierce and an unfamiliar man in a crisp navy suit who radiated the kind of authority you did not question. For one terrifying second, I thought Lyle had come with reinforcements that this was the moment he silenced us both. But then the man in the suit spoke. Lyle Granger, he said calmly. I am Special Agent Rowan with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under federal investigation for attempted murder, corporate fraud, and obstruction of justice. Lyle's face collapsed into shock, then rage, then something like panic. This is ridiculous. You have no evidence. Agent Rowan stepped forward. Actually, we have everything we need, including audio financial records and eyewitness accounts. Lyle's gaze snapped to Julian, hatred blazing in his eyes. You set me up. Julian stood steady, his voice low and unwavering. No, Lyle. You set yourself up the moment you decided my life was worth less than your ambition. The officer stepped in, gripping Lyle's arms as he tried to twist away. His voice cracked into something feral. You will regret this, Julian. I swear it. But Julian didn't flinch. And I stood beside him, refusing to step back, refusing to let Lyle see even a flicker of fear on my face. As they dragged him out, the weight of months of darkness seemed to lift from the room, one long breath at a time. When the door finally closed behind them, silence settled like dust after a storm. I turned to Julian, but before I could speak, he swayed slightly, his exhaustion finally breaking through the hard shell he had been holding himself in. I caught him by the arm. Sit. Please. His knees buckled onto the edge of the bed, and he exhaled so deeply it sounded like a release of everything he had carried since the night of the crash. He looked up at me with eyes that were suddenly soft, almost fragile. Clara, it is over. I nodded, but my voice trembled. Yes, it is. And for the first time since I met him, I felt something warm unfurl inside me, something like relief, but deeper, rooted in the knowledge that he was finally safe. Safe to remember, safe to breathe, safe to live, safe to feel. I sat beside him, my hand still hovering near his shoulder as if reluctant to break the connection. He leaned into my touch with a quiet gratitude that made my chest ache. I do not know how to thank you, he said softly. I shook my head. You do not have to. He took my hand, then slowly, carefully, as if it were something precious. I do, Clara. I woke up because of you. I stayed alive because of you. And I found the truth because you refused to let me fall back into the dark. His fingers tightened around mine, warm and steady. You were my anchor in every moment of chaos. And now that the danger was gone, now that the truth was out, something shifted between us again. Not like the desperate emotions born of fear, but something clearer, brighter, made of choice instead of survival. I felt it when he looked at me, when he breathed, when he said my name, Clara. My heart fluttered at the way he said it, as if it was the first word he had ever spoken and the last he wanted to forget. I looked up into his eyes, and suddenly the entire room seemed to fade around us. Julian lifted his other hand, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek. His touch lingered, slow and warm. You asked me once if what I felt was confusion, if waking up made me cling to the first person I saw. He shook his head gently. But now I know the truth. His voice lowered to a whisper that wrapped itself around my heartbeat. I love you. My breath caught. It was not rushed, not forced, not tangled in fear. It was simple, pure, clear, and it felt like sunlight breaking through a sky that had been gray for far too long. I did not speak immediately. I needed my voice to be steady, honest, worthy of this moment. When I finally exhaled, my words came out soft but sure. I love you too. Julian closed his eyes for a moment, relief washing over his face, and when he opened them, every wall he had ever built seemed to have crumbled. He leaned forward, his forehead gently resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the quiet. And then he kissed me. Slow, certain. Not a kiss of adrenaline or fear, but a promise. A beginning. A second chance at a life neither of us knew how to dream of before. Months passed quickly after that. Julian's recovery became a story that rippled through the hospital like a quiet miracle. He regained his strength. He took control of his company again, but this time with a foundation built on integrity, not the ambition that had nearly destroyed him. And through it all, I stayed by his side. Not as a nurse, not as a caretaker, but as the woman who had walked with him from darkness into light. The day he was discharged felt like the end of an era. We stood outside the hospital together, the morning sun warm on our faces. Julian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, flat, and carefully protected in a clear frame. When he handed it to me, my breath hitched. Inside the frame was the first washcloth I had ever used on him, the one from the morning everything began. He looked at me with a softness that made my heart bloom. This, he said, his voice steady, is the moment I came back to life. You deserve to keep it. I held the frame to my chest, overwhelmed. Julian took my hand as we stepped forward into the sunlight together, and as we walked, something glowed in my periphery. I looked up. The hospital windows were catching the morning light, scattering it across us like tiny floating lanterns. Lanterns made of hope. Lanterns made of second chances. Lanterns made of the moment everything turned to light. And I knew without doubt that our story had only just begun. If this story touched something deep inside you, even if it was just for a moment, I want you to sit with that feeling, because stories like Julian's and mine are reminders that no matter how dark life becomes, no matter how long we lie in places where hope feels impossible, a single spark of kindness can change everything. Sometimes that spark comes from a stranger. Sometimes it comes from someone who refuses to give up on you when the world already has. And sometimes, without realizing it, we become that spark for someone else. I have seen people walk through storms that should have broken them, people who lost everything they ever depended on, people who lived through nights that felt endless. But I have also seen how the smallest gesture, a gentle touch, a quiet presence, a moment of being seen can pull someone back from the edge. If you followed Julian's journey from the silence of his coma to the moment he stepped back into the light, then you already know how powerful a single human connection can be. Maybe you saw a piece of your own story in his. Maybe you remembered a time in your life when you were the one reaching for someone in the dark. Or maybe you remembered when someone reached for you. These stories are not just entertainment. They are mirrors. They hold fragments of us we often forget exist. They remind us that healing is possible, that love is possible, that second chances still happen in a world that often feels too fast, too loud, too unforgiving. And if this story made you feel anything at all, I want you to know something important. Your story matters too. Your pain, your resilience, your quiet victories, your moments of choosing kindness when you had nothing left to give. They matter more than you know. You are here listening to this because a part of you believes that hope is real, or at least wants to believe it again. Hold on to that. Nurture it. Let it grow. There is someone out there who needs your light just as much as you need theirs. And if you want to continue walking through stories that heal, stories that remind us that the human heart is stronger than loss, stronger than betrayal, stronger than the darkest nights life puts before us, then I invite you to join us by subscribing to this channel. Not because numbers matter, but because community does. Because when people come together seeking meaning, comfort, gentleness, and hope, something powerful happens. We stop feeling alone. We start remembering that there is goodness still alive in the world. Stories like this one take time, heart, and intention to create. They are crafted to lift you up, to hold you softly, to carry you through emotional valleys, and bring you back to a place where the light feels warm again. If that matters to you, if it brings a sense of peace or understanding to your day, then your presence here means more than you could ever imagine. So if you haven't already, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need a reminder that miracles come in quiet ways, and subscribe so you never miss the next story. Because someone out there, maybe even someone listening right now, is waiting for the moment when a story becomes the spark that changes everything for them. Thank you for being here, for listening, for feeling, for believing in the power of second chances. And until our next story, stay hopeful, stay gentle with yourself, and remember, even the smallest light can guide someone out of the darkest night.